In this video, Bob Clay gives us a picture of the current best practices for wide area network design. He contrasts two primary management platforms used to simplify the implementation and optimization of the wide area network. Here's Bob.
Well, hey everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Bob Clay. I'm a technical solutions architect for IoT. I'm based in Houston, Texas. I've realized I've spent my whole career in oil and gas. My dad worked in oil and gas, and then I started my career at Shell Oil Company in the IT department, and then moved to Cisco. And being in Houston, I've supported oil companies for my career. And I moved over to this IoT space because I thought it was really cool. You know, it's being outside, especially during this pandemic, was quite refreshing. So I kind of like going to these remote locations. So on today's topic, I'll cover, I guess I should back up a little to the title slide. You know, managing your industrial WAN is the title I have. I kind of wrestled with it because we're also managing the router. We're also managing apps in the router, which is sort of separate from the WAN. But ultimately, this is the this is the title I came up with. So I'll cover just in general, you know, what are some requirements in an industrial router? Why is it different? And then I'll cover some requirements for a managed network, or I don't want to say network management, but centralized management requirements for industrial routers. And then I'll compare two different products, which really do two different things. Cisco vManage for SD-WAN and Cisco IoT Operations Dashboard. So we know what makes an industrial router different. Well, for one thing, industrial routers or what are the requirements you have for these routers? So for one thing, the router's main purpose is to provide connectivity. And if you look at these locations, it's not like there's a, RJ45 jack just sitting in the ground out there that you can plug into, right? So, and these are deployed, in the oil industry. You have the upstream oil fields, downstream refineries, or maybe midstream oil and gas pipeline monitoring stations. And so you have limited connectivity options. And so WAN interfaces like, obviously Ethernet is common, but maybe DSL, cellular, or even Wi-Fi, are desirable WAN uplinks. And then the other thing that's unique about these industrial routers, or a requirement might be, is, I need features for mission critical applications. If you look at pipeline control systems, they use SCADA protocols and SCADA communications. And so in our routers, we have a SCADA protocol translation feature that enables you to connect legacy serial devices with IP devices in a process control network. So that may be really a critical feature that's not found in a regular, Catalyst router. Also, if you're working in vehicles, there's a different sort of communication network in a vehicle. They have what they call a CAN bus, where you can communicate with things in the vehicle. And also you may want to tie the power source to the ignition system. And so there's features tied to the ignition power management in the Cisco industrial routers. And then finally, in these routers, you may have a requirement for application hosting. And that enables the router to act as host for applications, and specifically for the IoT environment. An example is secure equipment access, which allows employees and third parties to connect through the industrial router in a secure way in order to configure and maintain industrial endpoints behind the router. And then if you look at hardware requirements, these routers are often deployed in harsh locations and subject to extreme temperatures, shock and vibration, and even hazardous gases. So this is a picture I actually took on a visit I made to an upstream site. It was a natural gas condensate production facility on the north slope of Alaska. It was October, so the sun did come up a little bit. This is probably about 2 or 3 o'clock, and it's probably in the setting side here. But you can see there's a lot of wind. You can see the snow blowing across the road. It was quite cold. But honestly, wind was the big thing we were running into here. If you opened both sides of the truck door, all the papers in the truck would blow across the tundra. But just gives you an idea of the kinds of locations that we work in. And to the right, you can see an oil pipeline there, and there's monitoring stations along that pipeline that are important to make sure the oil flows properly, et cetera. Another requirement is modularity. If, with these devices, you don't want to replace them a lot, and you also may need to upgrade them. So in the routers that we have, generally they're modular, and you can change, like you can upgrade the cellular connectivity from 3G to 4G and now 5G. Also, you can expand the products to include more interfaces for redundancy. And then we have these new modules, as Kevin mentioned previously. We have a LoRaWAN gateway module, so you can put that in the router. So having one platform where you can expand and change its use over time is very valuable. There's been a lot of discussion around electrification, and when you're at some of these locations, there's not a lot of power out there, so you want low power consumption. The IR1100 router that we have is one of those routers, and I think it's around 25 watts or something that it can run at. And that's important if you're powering from solar panels, etc. And then finally, you might require hazardous location certification if you're around explosive gases, etc. And so our devices are, a lot of them are class 1 Div 2 in environments when there's a certain installation process followed. And I'll just cover 2 examples of our industrial hardware, our rugged series routers here. This is the IR1101, and you can see it has 4 fast Ethernet LAN ports. It has a slot at the bottom for a cellular modem or a LoRaWAN module or other modules we may come up with. It's got a single GigE WAN port. It's actually a combo port, so you can use either an SFP for fiber connectivity or a copper. There's a copper port as well, and it also has an RS-232 port. But you know what? What if that's not enough? What if you say, look, I need more RS-232 ports, or I need more WAN ports? Well, that's where, if you look at the top of the router, we have this expansion module connector. And we also have the same module connector on the bottom, so you can put a module on top and a module on bottom and grow it vertically. And this is a picture of the IRM 1100 SP module. The last 2 digits I can explain. The S is for SFP, so it's an SFP slot there. And then the P is for PIM, which is the pluggable interface module. That's what our cellular cards plug into right there. So you can add this and add a second cellular connection or a second WAN Ethernet port. Then if you add this module, you get 2 more LAN ports. The 2 ports on the left highlighted in yellow are RJ45 gigabit Ethernet ports. And then these green ports on the right, these are 4 asynchronous serial ports. So there is quite a bit of the serial communication still out there in these networks. And we have customers that really want a lot of these. And they can aggregate that serial traffic into a router and send it somewhere to other devices. The other router I want to talk about is our IR 1800 series router. This specific model is the 1835. It has an ingress protection of 54 when deployed with the IR 1800 enclosure. What 54 gives you is protection from dust and water. The extended temperature range for this router, as well as the previous one, is from -40 to 167 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's pretty rugged. In addition to the WAN port, you have slots for 2 LTE modems, as well as for a Wi-Fi 6 module, and all of which can be used for connectivity to the WAN. And yes, the Wi-Fi module can be used for connectivity to the WAN. That would be sort of as a work group bridge. An application for that could be for a truck that pulls up somewhere close to a building, and then the Wi-Fi connects to the building. And if you have data in that truck, you could offload that data much better than when you would over the cellular connection. That application is used actually for ambulances. When they have a lot of data and they pull up to the hospital, they want to get the data offloaded as soon as possible. It's not practical to offload that data through cellular connections. So now I want to move on to
Hey, Bob.
management. Yes, go
Can
ahead.
you go back? Sorry if I missed it, but I wanted to, since we talked about LoRa earlier today, wanted to point out that this the PIM slot that we talked about will also fit in here, and this will act as a LoRa gateway.
Correct. Yes. So you can have the cellular B1 connection to the network, and then the LoRaWAN gateway, the other connection for your industrial assets. Good point. Thank you, Joel.
You bet.
So now I want to move on to the subject at hand, which is centralized management requirements for industrial routers. I kind of avoided the term WAN management because it depends what the focus is. If you look at these requirements, one of the requirements, the fourth bullet down, is SD-WAN provisioning. And so if that's your focus, there's a product that you'd want to focus on, which is our vManage product. And then there's other functions that aren't really necessarily important to the central IT department, and that would be to deploy or manage applications that are used at the site, or maybe to provision remote access for equipment at the site. The first three bullets here, the zero-touch provisioning, software image management, and template-based configuration, these are sort of the basics for any management platform. But I think the differences show up in these other three bullets. So this is sort of our general positioning for router management. If you look at this handsome guy on the left, he's the IoT operations person. Maybe he's in control systems engineer, and his focus is on maybe bringing up a router using sensors, other applications specific to the OT environment. He may not be focused on, look, I'm trying to manage the whole entire SD-WAN. That's more of a corporate function or a corporate IT function. This person is actually just trying to, use the router in ways to help operationalize his operational network. And then if you look to the right, the green vManage for SD-WAN section, this is really a tool that focuses on extending the enterprise network in most cases. This becomes popular when the enterprise has adopted SD-WAN and then they want to bring on their industrial sites. So we call that extending the enterprise to the industrial edge. And for those use cases, the vManage for SD-WAN product would be most appropriate. Now, in most cases, I would say that the IT department manages the SD-WAN. But Roland and I were talking before this call, and he pointed out, look, if you're running a pipeline network, that's a little different case. A pipeline network, you have an OT group managing a set of routers. It's not part of the enterprise. And those are use cases where you would have the OT department use vManage to manage those networks. And we see that it's quite popular, actually, using SD-WAN to manage pipeline networks. And a quick comparison of features, and this is just very high level. So on the left, we have IoT Operations Dashboard, and that is our OT operations management platform. And on the right, we have vManage, which is our SD-WAN management platform. And you can see there's common features between them. I mean, they both support industrial routers. They both support zero-touch provisioning. The feature we use at Cisco is called plug and play. And the idea there is you just plug the router in. The installer plugs the router in if it's a LAN connection, or he just uses a cell connection. He powers it up, and then automatically, as far as he's concerned, the router calls home and gets a configuration from the management platform and starts working. That's really the focus and the value of the zero-touch provisioning. And then if you look at the bottom, if you are running an SD-WAN overlay, there's really only one product to manage that in the Cisco world, and that's vManage for our SD-WAN portfolio. And then dynamic location mapping has to do with mobile assets. So either vManage or IoT Operations Dashboard. If there's a GPS features inside the router, you can actually use that and understand where things are located, et cetera. As far as the other thing I point out, the two checkboxes that are unique for IoT Operations Dashboard are for applications. I highlighted one application. Secure Equipment Access is an application that lets third parties or employees access equipment behind an industrial router. An example might be, something broke on the Rockwell network, and this is a remote location. The person could drive their truck to this location, but it would take a long time. If you can provide secure equipment access and you manage and limit what they can get to in a secure way, then that person can be remote. It's less expensive for them to operate in your network. It's less expensive for you because your downtime's reduced. And so that's the application I'm referring to here. And then the other use case for IoT Operations Dashboard is for IOX, which is our container system. for deploying applications in IOX, and they could be third-party or Cisco applications. So any questions just at high level between comparing these two solutions?
I think probably just to call it out, you said that you said that templating and config management and all of that is kind of table stakes. It's probably fair to say that even if there's not a GUI function for a specific item in either of these columns, the templating function actually can take care of a lot of that stuff from a provisioning and config management perspective in either column. So it's definitely not an exhaustive list, and there's aspects of, say, application management that would be there in SD-WAN. It's just not in the GUI, but you can do it with templates. So so there is aspects of it, but I think in general, I mean, this is a helpful view of how the tool works.
And ideally today we can't coexist. These two products can't coexist, but definitely we want to get there. We want customers to be able to do all these checkboxes, you know, in one platform without having to pick and choose. And that's definitely where the company's focused as far as our development effort. So let's talk a little bit about SD-WAN. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. There's whole presentations, and you can find enough on YouTube or Cisco documentation about SD-WAN. But in general, on the left in this blue bubble is really the features that Gartner laid out for what a basic SD-WAN system should do. We mentioned cost throughout this day, you know, backhaul cost savings. Customers are looking to save cost in their WAN. So if you have less expensive WAN links that you want to use and you don't want to use measured, you know, use WAN links, then you want to take advantage of that. SD-WAN can understand that. You may want direct internet access, so where you don't have to backhaul all the traffic to your central site and then go through a firewall in the data center just to get back out to the internet. Circuit load balancing is important, again, possibly for cost savings or just for performance improvement. And then centralized management and orchestration. And then Cisco adds to this the items on the right. So we include advanced features like security and segmentation, analytics and visibility, application-aware dynamic routing, and the ability to scale to include thousands of fixed and mobile endpoints. And the one thing Cisco's done, we've continued to enhance our SD-WAN portfolio. And at the bottom of this, you can see that we've added the industrial routers. So that's, I wouldn't say fairly recent. It's in the last couple of years, you've been able to do this. But unless you extend the SD-WAN to the industrial network. And we often, when we talk about our SD-WAN, we talk about any deployment, any transport, and any location. When we say any deployment, our SD-WAN solution lets you deploy the control system either in the cloud or in the customer data center. And because there are customers that are very cloud averse still, and they want to have that for control, and you can definitely do that. And then for the transport, you know, you want to you don't want to be limited to how you get from your device to across the WAN. You know, we support broadband, NPLS, LTE, and believe it or not, we even have Wi-Fi. You can connect via Wi-Fi. As this example I used with a truck using Wi-Fi as a backhaul to the building where they can then get to the WAN. And this slide really just at the bottom in the red box, I highlighted the platforms that we have support for SD-WAN, the IR 1100, which I covered, and the IR 1800, which I covered. We have an IR 8100, which is used in utility space. It can go on a utility pole. You actually use the same modular modems in the other platforms, so it's one set of modules. And then we have the IR 8300, which is a combination of a router and a switch, and it's got a lot of serial ports and modularity and pretty much everything you want. This might be used in like a train side location where you have a lot of things to connect, either serial or Ethernet, etc. So the SD-WAN is controlled by vManage, and it's a centralized controller. Again, it can be deployed either on-prem or in the cloud. And the dashboard provides inventory, health, and status information. And then it helps determine the path selection. This is the interface that the administrator uses to set up the policies for path selection and routing decisions to meet your objectives. And then this is an interesting slide, because what we've done here is we didn't just take SD-WAN and put it in the router and say this is an industrial SD-WAN. We actually have added features to SD-WAN to accommodate these industrial use cases. So when you look at industrial wireless mobility, our industrial routers have dual 5G and LTE connections, a capability. So you can, SD-WAN understands that and can manage that. Again, I mentioned workgroup bridge can be used as a way to backhaul. We can even set up a hotspot in the industrial router through SD-WAN. We can handle DSL communications, the serial communications with SCADA protocols. That's definitely something that's unique to this part of the network. And so those features are added into SD-WAN. And then I mentioned the vehicle interfaces, ignition, sense, and power management. Those can be managed through SD-WAN, as well as general purpose IO ports. And then, as Roland mentioned, if there's features we don't support, but the operating system supports it, vManage has these templates where you can create custom templates and sort of aggregate them together and then come up with your own CLI template. And so that's really valuable, because the GUI may not have the feature you want, and you don't want to ask Cisco to create the feature and wait while we work through our feature development process, right? You can actually just do this yourself and not be limited by what the GUI has. And that's what I want to do next is move on to IoT operations dashboard. But before I do that, I wanted to show this slide again and see if there's any questions about SD-WAN. Okay, so again, the focus for the vManage is on SD-WAN management, and the focus on IoT operations dashboard will be focused on the actual platform and the features in the platform itself.
Hey, Bob, I'll add
Sure.
to the conversation here.
Okay.
When I've seen my customers merge to SD-WAN, one of the consistent things that has always been an after effect and kind of unexpected is that when we work with a cloud controller like vManage, we have a consistent software strategy. A lot of customers, unfortunately, they've got every software train across their enterprise, and when we have a vulnerability, when we have a bug, it's really difficult to chase that down. And then, of course, each individual device being configured differently, and it sounds, too good to be true, but consistently, time after time, when we've gone to this cloud-controlled environment, we see attack cases go almost away. We see consistent experience, and so that's something I don't want to look over.
No, that's a great point, Joel. And in fact, if you're reading the news, there's still vulnerabilities out there that people haven't patched, right?
Oh yeah.
And those vulnerabilities are getting exploited. We've had, I think it was 2016 or 2017, we've announced patches, and people still are deploying those. But you have a great point. In SD-WAN environment, you can take one look at a screen, and generally this would be the central IT department that would do this and look at, like, hey, where am I running code that's vulnerable? And then you can make a decision to upgrade it and schedule it, during a maintenance window. Definitely. So let's move on to IoT operations dashboard. So this is a unique product, first of all, because it's focused on the OT side of things. There's different applications. If you think about it, it's really a platform, and there's different applications on this platform. The main one I'll talk about today is Edge Device Manager, and that's really more for deploying the router and managing the router. I also will talk about secure equipment access. I won't talk about cyber vision or edge intelligence. And we already saw, I think Robert Albach might talk about cyber vision, but Kevin talked about industrial asset vision. So we already covered that. So it's interesting that all these things are actually under the umbrella of IoT operations dashboard. An IoT operations dashboard is a cloud managed platform. So it's not on-prem, everything's in the cloud. And then again, you can manage your routing, wireless backhaul, and LoRaWAN, etc. And so, like I mentioned, I'm going to cover Edge Device Manager, which is the device. This is how we manage our devices. And I'll just go quickly into some of the, just kind of the connectivity at first. So at the bottom, this would be your device. And it's basically you have a connection to a plug and play server, a connection to IoT, dashboard, EDM, edge device manager, and then there's a Cisco cloud connection for the data. Like when we save cellular data, and use case information or just, performance information, that goes to a different part of the cloud. And this just gives you an overall view of what the connectivity looks like. And then I'll cover some, GUI slides. So this is Edge Device Manager. It shows you the inventory. And in this case, it's an IR1800 router. The firmware version is a little strange because this person's running a dev test image, but normally it would say something like iOS XE 17.9.1 or something like that. And you see the serial number and you see the status is up. And then, as I mentioned, we can also give you data on the cellular link. And then there's a little button on the right. It doesn't show up here, but you can see, do you want that for a day, a week, a month, whatever. There's different times, and you can see what that data looks like. And you can go into event log and troubleshooting and things like that. And then this is the application management page. So in this case, we're deploying an application. This is actually SEA, which is Secure Equipment Access. So this is not managing SEA. This is just deploying the agent. If you look at the red box on the left, I'm under Edge Device Manager. And then I will go into the SEA application next. So SEA is an agent that can run on the router. Again, it stands for Secure Equipment Access. In this picture, you have the person on the left. He's connecting through a router, over the internet. By the way, he connects to the cloud. All connections go to the cloud. That's where the security happens. You have to access the cloud and have appropriate credentials, and then you're tunneled into the SEA agent in the device, and then you can manage the workstation. And the basic version of SEA, you can use HTTPS, RDP, VNC, SSH, or Telnet. In this case, I believe he's using VNC to access that workstation. And then we have another option, which is more advanced, comes in an advanced package, which is SEA Plus. Now, in this case, you run an agent on your laptop, and it's very protocol independent. So in this case, I'm showing that he's actually going through the agent in the router, and he's managing a device, which he has special protocols to manage. Maybe this robot. He can't connect through VNC to this robot, so that's what he's connecting to. And then I show here what this is actually managing SEA inside. So if you look here on the left, we're now at Secure Equipment Access System Management. And here's the routers. There's 2 routers here, and one of them's up. It just tells you the status of the SEA agent. And then here's where I configure the device. In this case, let's say that desktop I wanted to manage is runs VNC. So here's where the access method, I define the access method in that device. And that, again, allows permission for me to access it. If I try another access method, I would be denied. And really, that brings me to the end. I know we're a little short on time, but I got through everything. So I just wanted to highlight, the industrial routers are hardened platforms. Use vManage if your focus is SD-WAN, because it's more like I'm managing the WAN and I'm adding the router to the WAN. And then if you're using features in the router that are OT focused, or you don't have an SD-WAN, then IoT Operations Dashboard is a great tool to use.
That was Bob Clay, who helped us understand the 2 primary options for Cisco's wide area networking for industrial sites. You can jump right into the next session of our Virtual Energy Summit by clicking on the next video. Take care.